There are moments in history when a single sentence refuses to disappear. It lingers in conversations, slips into headlines, and returns whenever the world feels uncertain. More than 4 centuries ago, Nostradamus wrote verses filled with symbols, metaphors, and coded language. He did not write clear predictions. Instead, he painted dramatic images of lions, storms, fire, blood, and fallen rulers. For many years, those lines were treated as poetic imagination, but over time, certain events appeared to echo his words, and that is where belief began to grow. In the mid-16th century, he published his collection of prophecies. One quatrain described a young lion piercing the eye of an older lion during combat. A few years later, in 1559, Henry II of France died after a lance shattered during a jousting match and struck through his visor into his eye. The detail felt too specific for many observers to ignore. Even Catherine de' Medici began to treat Nostradamus with greater seriousness. Whether coincidence or foresight, that event planted a powerful seed. Once people believe something has happened once, they begin searching for it again. As decades passed, readers continued revisiting his quatrains whenever history trembled. One verse described London burning in a year expressed numerically as 3 times 20 plus 6. In 1666, the Great Fire of London devastated the city. The numerical phrasing seemed to align closely enough that even skeptics admitted it was intriguing. Each alignment strengthened Nostradamus's reputation. Every crisis sent readers back to his pages. During the French Revolution, interpreters found lines describing oppressed crowds rising against imprisoned nobles. When Napoleon Bonaparte emerged from Corsica to reshape Europe, some readers claimed hidden anagrams and symbolic descriptions pointed toward him as well. Whether the connections were intentional or constructed afterward, the pattern remained the same. A major event would occur, and people would search the quatrains for echoes. The 20th century deepened this tendency. A verse mentioning Hister was interpreted by some as a reference to Adolf Hitler, though historians argue it referred to a geographic region near the Danube. After the September 11th attacks, claims spread that Nostradamus had predicted planes striking towers, even though many of the quoted lines were fabricated. During the global COVID-19 outbreak, older verses about plague resurfaced again. Nostradamus had lived through epidemics himself, so disease frequently appeared in his writing. When modern crises resemble old imagery, even loosely, they feel personal and immediate. Now, as a new year unfolds, attention has shifted once more to a specific line. In Century 1, Quatrain 26, Nostradamus wrote of a great man struck down in broad daylight by a thunderbolt. The wording suggests sudden force and public visibility. Daylight implies witnesses. It implies impact that cannot be hidden. Some interpret the thunderbolt literally, imagining an extraordinary accident. Others see metaphor in it, a sudden act of violence, a political collapse, or a dramatic public fall from power. The ambiguity is precisely what keeps the discussion alive. Another verse speaks of blood near the Ticino region, an area associated with calm landscapes and Swiss neutrality. The imagery feels unsettling because it contrasts so sharply with the peaceful identity of that location. Early in the year, tragedy in the Swiss Alps led some online commentators to revisit the quatrain, though official investigations described the incident as accidental. Prophetic interpretation rarely waits for confirmed facts. It follows emotional resonance instead. Then there is the line about a great swarm rising, followed by an ambush at night. On the surface, bees symbolize order and cooperation, but in prophetic symbolism, a swarm can represent collective force or movement. Some link it to political shifts, others to ideological waves building quietly before becoming visible. The phrase suggesting unknown origins adds to the tension, creating the sense of something forming beneath the surface before suddenly emerging. What ties these interpretations together is a theme of leadership and instability. The fall of a powerful figure, the rise of idols, movements gathering strength, and conflict stretching across months all revolve around authority and power. Whether Nostradamus intended such meaning is impossible to confirm. His language was layered and intentionally obscure. Yet when the world feels uncertain, symbolic language gains new life. The reason these verses feel stronger during turbulent times is not necessarily because they are accurate, but because uncertainty makes people search for patterns. Ancient warnings provide structure when the present feels unpredictable. As the year continues, discussions will likely expand and interpretations will multiply. The text itself does not change, but the world around it does. And in that shifting landscape, old words often sound new again. As the calendar turned and early tensions began stacking quietly on top of one another, attention drifted toward another unsettling passage, a quatrain describing 7 months of sustained conflict. It did not read like a passing skirmish. It carried the weight of endurance. 7 months of struggle, 7 months of damage, 7 months where events would refuse to calm. The verse originally referenced towns from 16th century France, but modern interpreters rarely focus on those names. Instead, they focus on duration. Time feels measurable, and when prophecy gives a number, even a simple one, it becomes magnetic. 7 months is long enough to change the world. History shows that wars rarely arrive with dramatic announcements. They build in layers: economic pressure, political polarization, strategic positioning, intelligence leaks, rhetoric sharpening slowly until one miscalculation tips the balance. By the mid-2020s, the global landscape already carried visible strain. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, which began in 2022, had reshaped European security. NATO expanded, sanctions deepened, defense budgets rose. In the Middle East, the aftershocks of the 2023 Israel-Hamas war continued influencing regional alignments. Across Asia, territorial disputes intensified in strategic waterways. None of these required prophecy to appear dangerous. They were present realities. What gave the 7-month line its renewed life was the sense that the world felt primed, not necessarily for total collapse, but for a concentrated escalation. Some analysts proposed that if a new confrontation erupted, it might not immediately spiral into a global war. Instead, it could unfold in a defined phase, a half-year stretch of heightened hostility before stabilizing into a frozen standoff or uneasy truce. That interpretation allowed the prophecy to feel specific without being absolute. Then another verse entered the conversation. It described ships encircling one another before a mortal conflict was released. In Nostradamus's time, ships meant wooden galleys and coastal fleets. In modern imagination, they mean destroyers, aircraft carriers, submarines, stealth frigates, and surveillance drones scanning open water. The imagery evolved with technology. The South China Sea quickly became the central focus of speculation. This region is one of the most strategically contested bodies of water in the world. China asserts expansive claims through its 9-dash line. Taiwan maintains its own position. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei all hold overlapping claims. Beyond them stands the United States, conducting freedom of navigation operations and maintaining defense commitments in the region. Count them, and the number reaches 7 active stakeholders with visible maritime presence. For believers, that numerical symmetry felt almost too precise to dismiss. Military observers have repeatedly warned that the density of ships and aircraft operating in contested waters increases the risk of accidental escalation. Near collisions between naval vessels have already occurred. Fighter jets have intercepted each other at dangerously close distances. Radar locks,
communication breakdowns, and aggressive maneuvers all create scenarios where a single error could trigger a chain reaction. In that environment, the image of 7 ships encircling each other stops feeling abstract. It becomes plausible. Some commentators pointed to alternative flashpoints. The Black Sea remains tense, particularly since the Russia-Ukraine war altered naval balances. The Mediterranean hosts overlapping NATO and Russian operations. Even the Arctic is emerging as a new strategic arena as melting ice opens shipping lanes. Yet the South China Sea maintains a uniquely layered combination of economic importance, national pride, and military presence. It carries both symbolic and strategic weight. Trade routes passing through those waters account for trillions of dollars in global commerce each year. Semiconductor supply chains, critical for electronics, vehicles, and defense systems, intersect with regional stability. Energy shipments travel those sea lanes. A prolonged naval confrontation there would ripple through financial markets within days. Fuel prices would respond. Shipping insurance rates would surge. Manufacturing slowdowns would follow. Even distant economies would feel consequences. Under this lens, a 7-month conflict does not need to involve every continent to feel global. A regional maritime war could create worldwide economic shockwaves. There is also a psychological layer. The number 7 often symbolizes completion or transition in symbolic traditions. Some interpreters argue that Nostradamus may not have meant literal months, but rather a phase of transformation, a cycle of intensity culminating in restructured power dynamics. If read symbolically, the prophecy might describe the most volatile period of a broader geopolitical shift. Others insist on literalism. They imagine a start date, perhaps triggered by an unexpected military maneuver or political declaration, followed by 7 months of concentrated confrontation before diplomacy regains control. Meanwhile, defense budgets continue rising across major powers. Military exercises grow more frequent and more complex. Alliances are reaffirmed publicly. Diplomatic channels remain active behind closed doors. This dual movement, preparation and restraint, defines modern geopolitics. Nations demonstrate strength while simultaneously signaling a desire to avoid open conflict. The tension between deterrence and provocation is delicate. In recent years, technological advancements have added new dimensions to potential conflict. Cyber warfare can disable infrastructure without a single missile launch. Satellite interference can blind navigation systems. Economic sanctions can destabilize economies as effectively as physical attacks. A modern war might not resemble traditional battlefield imagery. It could blend naval presence, cyber disruption, economic retaliation, and strategic misinformation campaigns into a layered confrontation. In that context, Nostradamus's imagery of siege and ships feels surprisingly adaptable. A siege could become a digital blockade. A thunderbolt could become a cyber strike, shutting down power grids. Fire from the sky could reference missile systems or even electromagnetic pulses from solar activity, disrupting communications. This elasticity is precisely why his writing survives each century. The prophecy does not dictate specifics. It provides a framework broad enough for reinterpretation. And when the world already feels tense, that framework appears more relevant. Yet there is another perspective worth considering. Throughout history, humans have repeatedly expected imminent large-scale wars that never materialized. The Cold War produced decades of nuclear anxiety without direct superpower conflict. Maritime confrontations have occurred before without escalating beyond controlled incidents. Diplomacy often succeeds quietly, without headlines. The danger of prophecy is not that it predicts war. The danger is that it normalizes expectation of it. If societies begin to anticipate conflict as inevitable, they may interpret defensive moves as aggressive signals. Suspicion grows, miscommunication multiplies. The psychological component of geopolitics becomes as influential as physical capability.
As the months unfold, the world continues balancing between tension and stability. Naval fleets maneuver, satellites orbit, diplomats negotiate, intelligence agencies monitor, markets react to every rumor. And the 7-month line remains suspended, neither fulfilled nor dismissed. Whether it refers to literal conflict, symbolic transition, or simply reflects humanity's ongoing cycle of tension and recalibration, its power lies in how it sharpens attention. It causes people to watch the horizon more closely. It makes routine military drills feel charged with possibility. It turns ordinary geopolitical friction into part of a larger imagined arc. In reality, history is shaped not only by events, but by expectations. If leaders act with caution, 7 months may pass without catastrophe. If restraint holds, ships will continue to circle without firing. If diplomacy outweighs pride, tension may dissolve before reaching ignition. The verse does not control the future, but the way people respond to it might influence how carefully they move through the present. And as the year progresses, the waters remain calm on the surface, yet undeniably crowded beneath. As the conversations about war and falling leaders continued, another verse began circulating more quietly, one that did not describe fire or blood, but something more subtle and perhaps more dangerous. In Century 3, Quatrain 26, Nostradamus wrote about people preparing idols of kings and princes, elevating soothsayers and empty prophets as if they were worthy of worship. At first glance, the imagery feels ancient, almost biblical. Statues, thrones, blind devotion. But when placed against modern society, the symbolism becomes strikingly relevant. In today's world, idolization does not require marble statues. It thrives through screens, rallies, slogans, and social media movements. Leaders are no longer distant monarchs, they are constant presences in daily digital life. Their words spread instantly, their images circulate endlessly. Supporters defend them with fierce loyalty, critics attack with equal intensity. The line between admiration and worship can blur more quickly than most people realize. Throughout recent years, political polarization has deepened in many countries. Elections have grown more emotional. Campaigns increasingly center on personalities rather than policies. In some regions, leaders are portrayed as saviors capable of rescuing nations from decline. In others, they are depicted as existential threats to democracy itself. This extreme framing fuels division, and in that division, the prophecy about idols gains symbolic strength. The verse also warns about false prophets, figures who rise not through wisdom, but through charisma and confidence. In an age of viral information and algorithmic-driven content, persuasive voices can gain influence rapidly, sometimes without accountability. Conspiracy theories spread faster than corrections. Influencers shape political opinion. Public trust in institutions fluctuates. When authority fragments, alternative voices rush to fill the space. Some interpreters argue that the prophecy points toward the elevation of leaders beyond democratic limits, figures treated as untouchable or beyond criticism. History provides many examples of how personality cults can reshape nations. Loyalty to an individual can override loyalty to institutions. Once institutions weaken, stability becomes fragile. What makes this interpretation resonate in the mid-2020s is the visible tension between democratic structures and authoritarian impulses worldwide. In multiple countries, debates rage over constitutional limits, media freedom, judicial independence, and executive power. Strong leaders often justify expanded authority as necessary for national survival. Supporters view it as strength, critics see warning signs. The prophecy does not name a country or a person. That ambiguity allows it to be applied broadly. In one nation, a charismatic reformer may gather overwhelming public support. In another, an entrenched ruler may consolidate control. In yet another, populist movements may demand sweeping changes to existing systems. Each scenario fits the imagery differently. There is also a psychological layer to idol creation. During uncertain times, people crave clarity. Complex problems, economic inequality, climate instability, technological disruption, feel overwhelming. A confident voice promising simple solutions becomes attractive. The more unstable the environment, the stronger the desire for decisive leadership. Yet, history repeatedly demonstrates that concentrated power carries risk. Democracies rely on balance, executive, legislative, judicial branches counteracting one another. When that balance erodes, decisions accelerate, but accountability declines. Nostradamus' warning about lifting idols may be less about statues and more about surrendering critical thought. While political idolization dominates discussion, the prophecy can extend beyond government. Celebrity culture, financial influencers, and even technological leaders can gather devoted followings. In a hyper-connected world, influence scales quickly. A single figure can shape markets, social movements, and public discourse in real time. As 2026 unfolds, observers note how digital ecosystems amplify devotion. Algorithms reward engagement, and outrage often generates engagement more effectively than nuance. Polarization deepens because strong emotion travels farther than balanced analysis. In such an environment, idolization becomes almost structural, built into the mechanics of attention. Another layer of the prophecy connects with unrest. When idols rise, opposition often rises alongside them. Mass protests have appeared in recent years across multiple continents. Demonstrations for democratic reform, economic justice, environmental policy, and political accountability. These protests reflect both distrust of power and fear of its consolidation. In that tension between worship and resistance, societies negotiate their future. The warning embedded in the quatrain feels simple but heavy. Do not surrender discernment. Do not mistake confidence for wisdom. Do not elevate leaders beyond scrutiny. Whether interpreted spiritually or politically, the message encourages vigilance. Then there is the sky. Nostradamus frequently referenced celestial events, eclipses, comets, strange lights, alignment. Historically, such phenomena carried symbolic weight. An eclipse could be seen as an omen. A comet could signal change. In August 2026, a major solar eclipse is scheduled to cross parts of the northern hemisphere. While astronomers treat eclipses as predictable natural events, symbolic thinkers often attach deeper meaning. The quatrains describing the sun darkened in daylight feel dramatic, yet eclipses have occurred countless times throughout history without signaling catastrophe. However, during tense geopolitical periods, celestial imagery can amplify emotional narratives. A darkened sky becomes a metaphor for uncertainty. At the same time, scientific discussions about solar activity have gained attention. Periodic increases in solar storms, coronal mass ejections, can disrupt satellites, power grids, and communication systems. Experts emphasize that preparedness reduces risk, but the idea of fire from the sky naturally captures imagination. A severe solar storm could temporarily impact infrastructure, reminding modern societies of their technological vulnerability. Here again, Nostradamus' language stretches easily across centuries. Fire from the heavens once meant divine wrath. Today, it could mean solar radiation or missile systems. The metaphor evolves. What ties all these threads together, idols, unrest, celestial signs, is uncertainty at the top of societal structures. Leadership legitimacy, institutional strength, technological dependence, and global alignment all intersect. When people feel that these pillars are shifting simultaneously, prophetic language resonates more deeply. Yet, it is important to recognize something crucial. Prophecy does not create events, it reflects human anxiety about them. The same verses existed decades ago. They become louder only when circumstances align with fear. As 2026 continues, societies face real challenges: geopolitical friction, technological transformation, climate concerns, economic volatility. These pressures are tangible and measurable. Whether or not ancient verses hold predictive power, the responsibility for navigating the future rests with present decisions. The warning about idols may ultimately be less about a single leader and more about collective behavior. Democracies weaken when citizens disengage. Authoritarianism strengthens when skepticism fades. Stability depends not only on those in power, but on those who grant that power. Above, the sky will darken briefly during eclipse. Below, ships will continue to sail. Speeches will be delivered. Elections will be contested. Protests will gather. Markets will rise and fall. The prophecy remains open-ended. Its meaning will be shaped not by destiny, but by choices. As 2026 unfolded, alongside warnings of fallen leaders and idolized figures, another quatrain drew quiet yet intense attention. Century 1, Quatrain 26, written by Nostradamus. It spoke of a great swarm rising and an ambush by night. On the surface, these words evoke images of insects, buzzing clouds, dark shadows flitting across cities, and sudden stings that catch the unprepared. Yet beneath the literal meaning lies something far deeper. Swarms rarely describe nature alone. They often symbolize collective action, concentrated power, and strategic organization. In this sense, Nostradamus may have been describing not bees, but coordinated forces, armies, social movements, political factions, or even digital networks that move with precision and intent. The phrase ambush by night intensifies the unease. Night implies stealth, invisibility, and surprise. Combined with the swarm, it suggests that forces are building quietly, almost imperceptibly, before revealing themselves publicly. Modern interpreters immediately connected this to social and geopolitical movements, where strategy, timing, and coordination define outcomes. In this context, events might erupt suddenly, striking with precision and leaving observers scrambling to respond. Historical symbolism reinforces this reading. Bees, for instance, were an imperial emblem for Napoleon Bonaparte, representing unity, order, and disciplined consolidation of power. Nostradamus's swarm could therefore signify an emerging force that gathers strength silently before a dramatic emergence that shifts the balance of power. Some modern readers have gone further, suggesting that the swarm may metaphorically represent the rise of authoritarian or extremist movements, disciplined and mobilized to exert influence suddenly. In 2026, multiple global developments feed such interpretations. Across Europe, far-right parties and populist movements have gained momentum, influencing both public policy and national narratives. In the United States, political polarization continues to escalate, while elections highlight deep divisions over governance and ideology. Across continents, leadership contests, protests, and ideological campaigns have intensified, making the imagery of a quiet, rising swarm feel almost tangible. The ambush component, sudden, visible impact, suggests that once these forces strike, they could shift power dynamics rapidly. The swarm metaphor extends beyond politics.
In a digitally interconnected world, coordinated online campaigns, viral disinformation, and algorithm-driven narratives can act like swarms, striking simultaneously across regions. A viral hashtag, a mass mobilization, or a sudden wave of public sentiment can disrupt markets, influence
Elections, and force governmental response, all without a single missile fired. Just as bees move as a collective organism, human networks today operate with similar efficiency and unpredictability. Environmental and natural disasters also resonate with this imagery. Sudden wildfires, flash floods, or disease outbreaks can spread quickly and unpredictably, creating a sense of swarming disruption. The quatrain's layered meaning, social, political, and natural, amplifies anxiety in a world already sensitive to sudden shocks. In other words, the prophecy becomes a lens through which people interpret multiple concurrent crises. The Swiss tragedy of January 1, 2026 in Crans deepened these interpretations. A fire erupted in a crowded nightclub in the Alps, killing dozens and injuring over 100. While investigations cited accidental causes, the public imagination merged the event with Nostradamus's quatrain about the Ticino River overflowing with blood. Ticino, known for its tranquil landscapes and neutral stance, became symbolically inverted. Where calm and safety were expected, sudden violence occurred. The metaphor of overflowing blood, combined with a swarm and ambush, heightened the sense that unseen forces might be gathering in places long considered safe. Even celestial imagery feeds the prophecy's tension. Nostradamus frequently referenced comets, eclipses, and unusual alignments. In August 2026, a major solar eclipse is scheduled to cross parts of the northern hemisphere. Astronomers treat eclipses as predictable natural phenomena, but in the symbolic or prophetic frame, a darkened sun evokes disruption, uncertainty, and even fear. Coupled with warnings of solar storms or coronal mass ejections capable of affecting satellites, power grids, and communication networks, the sky itself becomes a source of imagined or potential disruption. A thunderbolt in daylight, once metaphorical, could now symbolize sudden technological failure, mass blackouts, or even military strikes. The quatrains also intersect with maritime concerns. Earlier interpretations of 7 ships in a tense naval standoff have become intertwined with the swarm imagery. Observers imagine coordinated fleets silently maneuvering before surprise escalation. The ambush by night could represent sudden military operations, naval blockades, or cyber attacks, where the first public sign arrives suddenly and dramatically. The idea of a concentrated, coordinated force echoes the swarm metaphor, whether at sea, in cities, or across digital networks. This layered symbolism also highlights human psychology. The prophecy thrives on uncertainty. Hidden origins, unexpected eruptions, and rapid escalation naturally capture attention. Modern society is hyper-connected and hyper-aware. The moment a sudden event occurs, news spreads globally, magnifying perception of its significance. Swarms, ambushes, and invisible forces take on enhanced power because everyone is watching, ready to interpret meaning. The year 2026 shows multiple contexts in which this could manifest. Political mobilizations are growing, social movements are coordinating across borders, and extremist factions are quietly consolidating influence. At the same time, environmental shocks, technological vulnerabilities, and unpredictable natural events remain ever present. Each element mirrors parts of Nostradamus's imagery, merging centuries-old metaphor with modern reality. In practical terms, the warning embedded in the quatrain is as much about awareness as prediction. It suggests that sudden events, social, political, or natural, may occur where they are least expected.
The responsibility falls on observers and leaders alike to notice the subtle signs of a rising swarm, to prepare for ambushes of all kinds, and to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Whether interpreted literally or symbolically, the prophecy's enduring power lies in its capacity to sharpen attention. People watch the horizon more closely. Fleets, movements, protests, and digital waves gain new significance. Each small incident may be seen as part of a larger emerging pattern. And so, 2026 pulses with anticipation. Swarms in motion, leaders idolized or challenged, celestial signs looming, and hidden forces gathering. Each event, each decision, and each response contributes to the unfolding narrative. Nostradamus's words continue to resonate, not as a predetermined fate, but as a reflection of human anxiety, collective vigilance, and the delicate balance between visible order and hidden potential chaos. The year marches forward, with every observer, every participant, and every unexpected occurrence forming part of a vast, interconnected swarm, a world simultaneously fragile, alert, and in motion.